Hi, I'm JERRI HEID, Youth Services Specialist at the Ames Public Library, and welcome to Well Read, a program about a little bit of this and a little bit of that at your Ames Public Library. Well, if you haven't been in the library lately or down at 515 Douglas or anywhere in our temporary location, you know that a big word that we've been using a lot is the word change. And now, even looking up the word change, you can use several different devices or, that old antiquated book where you look it up and you see a definition. And in the definition in our Webster's New World Dictionary, it says to receive, reciprocally, exchange, switch, or to cause to become different, alter, transform, and convert. Well, there's been a lot of that going on at the Ames Public Library, not even just in physical space, but also in the Youth Services Department. We have two wonderful new employees that have one just arrived shortly before we moved, so she got to transfer all those books onto new shelves. And Mary Jen, who has been here for 4 or 5 months and has also been lucky enough to know a little bit about the library before and then now where we're at in the change. So TANVI, I didn't say your name the first time, did I? So we have TANVI and Mary Jen. Welcome, and welcome to Iowa and Ames, Iowa. So TANVI, do you want to tell us a little bit about where you've come from and experiencing Iowa? Because I understand it's your first time in Iowa. It's
actually my first time to Iowa, but the whole Midwest in general. So I've never actually been anywhere in the whole area. So I'm actually from New Jersey, central New Jersey, just outside of Princeton, New Jersey. And sometimes it feels like a world away. It took 20 hours to get here to Ames. And then other times I feel like I have to remind myself that I'm somewhere so far away from home. Some things are totally different. Everything else is exactly the same.
So was it really flat compared to where you were at?
I found that Illinois was actually a lot more flat than Iowa was. I was really surprised once we hit the border that there's actually a lot of rolling hills in Iowa.
Especially in the eastern part.
Yes, yeah, so driving through the eastern part. What surprised me a lot more was how much farmland there is. I've seen farms before, but not to the extent that they have there. And they're beautiful, but I've just never seen so much open space. The Northeast is not known for open space.
That's true too. And you haven't really you've seen it in our winter time because you've only been here, what is it, a month now?
It's, almost exactly a month. So I'm actually so new that I didn't even get to help move those books, like you said.
You did kind of, right? Because you kind of started part of it or, finished up on part of it. So
yeah, towards the end.
So now, Mary Jen, you've been here long enough, though, that you actually moved some of the books, or a lot of them.
Quite a few.
And you've been here since approximately August or so you've had a little bit. But tell us about where you came from.
I am originally from Wyoming, but I came here directly from Illinois where I was getting my master's. So I sort of have moved around a bit since I left Wyoming, lived in Philadelphia for a while and lived overseas for a little while. And so, but this is also my first time in Iowa, not my first time in it, my first time living in Iowa.
Mm-hmm. So, and I'm homegrown Iowa girl, so welcome to Iowa and thank you very much for coming. So I think the depth, just in a library, like in a library collection, you have to have that depth of the collection, that we're adding depth to our employees and staff members and adding that versatility that we need to share with our community members as well. So, so TANVI, you got your degree out in Rutgers?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I did both my undergrad and my graduate at Rutgers in New Brunswick. So it's nice to be back in a college town again, to be honest.
And Ames is noted for Iowa State University and our cyclones and our wonderful community of a variety of people around the world and the research that we do, our land-grant university. So do either one of you have something unique that you talked about the farmland. Is there anything else that has surprised you about Iowa compared to where you've been from?
Well, when I was living in Illinois, I said, oh, it's really nice out here. Everybody's so friendly. And people would say, oh, you should go to Iowa. And it's true. I think the first time I came here, the first place I went was Hy-Vee or the grocery store or something. And strangers, clearly, I didn't know anybody in town, strangers just smiling and saying hi and how are you and, can I help you find anything? And it really is as friendly as people say it is.
Well, that's good. We like to hear that. So have you had any unique experiences here in Iowa yet, other than this, snow?
We get a lot of snow, yeah. I was going to say the same exact thing, actually. People have been so nice. Back in New Jersey, when I was telling people I was going to move to Ames, they're all like, oh my God, people in Iowa are the nicest people ever. And, again, back in the Northeast, we're known for a lot of things, including being really tough and maybe not as nice. So it's been a really nice change, actually.
Oh, that's good. Well, I'm glad that you're enjoying your time in Iowa. But let's talk about something common that we have between all the states that you've lived in and out east, and is our libraries, and that offering of books and stories and why you're in the library world. Tanvi, would you like to share anything about the history of how you got to be a librarian and why you chose it?
It's sort of twofold. My undergrad is in sociology. So when I was studying sociology, that was sort of the first time I had heard things like digital divide and, access to resources. And then at the same time, I started working in a library just because I needed a job. It was convenient. And I realized that sociology and librarianship had a lot in common. And librarianship is sort of the practical application of the things that you learn. So originally, I wanted to pursue graduate work in sociology, and instead I decided to do librarianship. And then not too long after, I was asked to fill a position in youth services, and that was when I knew that was what I was going to do.
And now I know why we hired you, or where your emphasis is at. But would you like to tell our viewers where some of your emphasis and
my favorite group, I love all of the kids, but I love working with teenagers. They're so opinionated. They're kind of crazy sometimes. They have a lot of energy, and I love it. I thrive on it.
Well, we've heard a little bit about Tanvi's path to her librarianship. How about you, Mary Jen? How did you get to become a librarian?
Well, I too started working out in a library when I was in high school and sort of had the job for a number of years. And I started, my first major in college was in broadcast, and I was pretty excited about it, and then they dropped the program at my school. And then that sort of hit me then. I was like, I love books a lot more than I love TV, and I love what I'm doing at the library so much. Why don't I go into library services instead? And so I just sort of finished my degree in communications, and then after that decided to get my master's. So it took me a few years, but I was definitely pretty sure that was what I wanted to do.
And we were just discussing too about the tracks in youth services and learning a little bit about that, and you said that you were taking that path with you, kind of a track in youth services where you learned several things. And as a youth services librarian, we do perform a lot. So communication is important. Study of human nature is important, and people. And my background is in art history and costume history and design. So, and I feel that I use that every day as well. So, librarians and being a librarian is kind of a whole big group of people helping others, and so do you find where do you find your satisfaction? You talked about working with teens. Where do you find your satisfaction at, Mary Jen, in working with? How does your job as a librarian reward you?
I would say in a few different ways. I think one of the reasons I became a librarian is because I very much am a generalist at heart, and I like to know a little bit about a lot of things. And so I love that that's what being a librarian helps you do. And so, somebody comes to you with a reference question, and you're like, I have no idea. Let's find out more about that. And so, you get to find out about a bunch of different things. And also, I just love being a youth services librarian, just because kids have this unbridled affection that they have absolutely no fear of showing, and if they don't like it, they're going to tell you. So I think it's the honesty and the excitement that kids have about books and reading and learning that really sort of attracted me to youth services in particular.
Well, that's a nice transition, because I know people think of libraries and they think books. And that's what we've read, every book that's in the library, and we have an opinion about every book, or we have the knowledge of what that book is about. Do either one of you have favorite authors or favorite books, or do you have a memory? My very first book that I read was when I was in, well, not that I read, but was read to me, was Muffy Goes to Kindergarten, and I still own it. It's a little golden book. Do you have a favorite book that you would like to share, or author? Sometimes that's a hard question to answer. So who would like, Mary Jen, would you like to jump right into that?
Oh, sure. What an easy question. I think probably as a kid, one of my strongest memories, I mean, I loved Cinderella growing up, and I was one of those kids who had my parents read it to me every night before bed, and sometimes multiple times. So that was sort of a passion of mine. But I remember very specifically the first chapter book that I finished, and the pride that I felt when I finished it. And for a really long time, I got a sticker from my teacher when I finished, and for a long time I had that sticker on my bookmark, and I kept it for years. And the book that I read was Mrs. Pigglewiggle, and I don't know if those are as popular nowadays, but I loved the sort of the older adult who comes in and sort of tricks kids into doing funny things, or gets them to do things that they wouldn't have normally wanted to do, because she sort of takes a different route than usual. And I just thought they were really funny, really entertaining books.
And they are. They still are very popular today. My granddaughter just her teacher was reading them to her last year in second grade. So they are very important, and there's no one like Miss Pigglewiggle. So, and how about you, Tanvi? How about...
I read a lot of Nancy Drew and Babysitter's Club books, and actually the first chapter book I can remember finishing was Mallory and the Trouble with Twins. When I was in second grade. I'm sure I read other chapter books before that, but that's the first one I remember finishing. But I read a lot of Roald Dahl when I was a kid, and he's still one of my favorites today. I didn't read Mrs. Pigglewiggle, but I'll be sure to check it out now.
But you've talked a little bit about Roald Dahl too, about what you liked, and do you want to share some of those thoughts?
His books are seriously creepy. Even the ones for kids, they're really funny, but they're about cannibals and witches who eat children. And I think it's kind of cool that Roald Dahl was sort of one of the first that I can think of children's authors who really trusted children to deal with things that are not so pleasant, things that are a little bit scary. And Quentin Blake's illustrations definitely helped, because they're really, sketchy and light and airy and fun. But Roald Dahl writes really, really creepy books for adults. I mean, they are so twisted and so incredibly, delightfully just horrid. And I like that comes through in his children's books.
And it does. I mean, very much. If you read the book, and they kind of soften it in some places, venues of production, but most generally if you sit and read the books, it's amazing to me what happens to some of the things that children, but that's true of lots of children's literature. I mean, it's like their process of coming of age is that they have to read this book or read these books and then find out that that they can accomplish this, or they can befriend that person that's got this wonderful imagination, and that's okay, or have all these horrible things happen to them, and like the series of unfortunate events and stuff. I always I cannot believe that all these things are happening to these poor children. But it is a common thread through many, many things in children's literature. And like you said, Dahl was the forerunner of some of those plot lines that I don't know what happened to regular, normal children. But even in Sweet Valley Twins and Sweet Valley University. Yeah, I shelved them a lot when I first started.
This is true.
I didn't read those only as an adult because, you know, they were the books that I was promoting to children when I was in the beginning at your ages. We won't go there. That was another word for change, right? Growing older. But, you know, again, I believe adults or people outside the library world believe that we read a lot of the books that are in the books or in our library. So are there any favorite adult authors or adult reads that you would like to suggest to our adult viewers?
I actually just read one recently with my book club that was fantastic, and I would, if I could, read it all over again. But unfortunately, there's a whole line of books I have to read. It's Bel Canto by Ann Patchett, and it was so beautifully written, and it's sort of, I think when you talk about the plot, it doesn't really sound as intriguing, but I think it's mostly about the way that she's written it. But it's about this group of sort of foreign dignitaries who are all together at this one dinner party, and then they get held hostage. And it's about the sort of the events that take place. And, you know, it's based on an actual story that took place, but she sort of fictionalized it. And the way that she sort of gets into the head of all these different peoples from different countries, and I actually listened to it, and the woman who read it was just phenomenal. She was extremely talented. So I would actually really recommend listening to the book, but it's an extremely beautifully written one.
And that is also a very good point, that, you know, reading and listening sometimes, and of course in the communication world, that would be something, an important part. But it is our books on CD and downloadable books, reading aloud and listening to that. I think that makes us good children's librarians too, because you're never too old to listen to a book, are we? Mm-hmm. And how about you, Tanvi? Do you have an adult book that you would like to share before we?
One of my favorites is A Confederacy of Dunces by John Kennedy Toole. That book was really hard for me to get through. Someone recommended it to me, and I started it probably about 5 or 6 times. And it wasn't until I hit about halfway through that I realized that it was one of the most brilliant books that I had ever read in my life. And it's about this guy named Ignatius, and he's like in his 30s, and he lives with his mom, and he's just morbidly obese, incredibly arrogant, thinks that he is, you know, God's gift to the planet, and he's just so loathsome. I mean, you just hate him, and he doesn't really work. And so the story is sort of a series of almost short stories. You know, they all take place in New Orleans, but it follows the lives of maybe 3 or 4 different characters, with Ignatius being sort of the common thread through them. And it all comes together in the end, and it's so spectacular. And you realize that even though you hate Ignatius, like, you kind of love him too. And it's just hysterical. It's absolutely phenomenal. And
it's funny how we can have our love-hate relationships with those books that we have, that we're reading those stories and the characters, those fictitious characters in our lives, and they become alive when we read the story. Well, I thank you for both coming in and sharing your life and your route of getting here, your change that you have. I found a quote. You know, I didn't bring Bartlett's quote book of quotations here, but I do have my little smartphone that another way that we can change to get things. And this happens to be let's see, and I've lost him. He was here. Albert Einstein. The world as we have created it is a process of our thinking, cannot be changed without changing our thinking. And I think in our move with the library and our move that you've had to move and choose to move here, you've changed your thinking to come here. We thank you for coming and being part of our Ames Public Library. And so people out there, you want to come on in and meet Mary Jen and meet Tanvi. They're a wonderful addition to our library world, and we're excited to have them here, and they will be doing outstanding things, especially this summer when we finally get to get back into the the real world of libraries and programming instead of just moving the whole library. And so come on in and meet TANVI and Mary Jan, and thank you very much for viewing. And until next time, don't let change get the best of you. Thanks.